Our top story, with case numbers continuing to fall, jurisdictions around Australia are in the process of easing coronavirus-related restrictions. The New South Wales government will today announce its plans to begin easing restrictions. Starting Friday, people in New South Wales will be allowed to have up to 5 visitors at their house, and outdoor gatherings of up to 10 people will be permitted, but regional travel remains off the table. The West Australian government will also outline its plans to reopen today, while Victorian authorities will announce their plans on Monday. As of this morning, Queenslanders are allowed 5 visitors in their home, and South Australians will be allowed to go on regional trips and eat outdoors at cafes and restaurants from tomorrow.
Now, we are expecting New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian this morning to announce the lifting of some of these restrictions as part of the state's Stage 1 changes. For more on this, we're now joined by state political reporter Ashley Raper, who joins us in the studio. Ashley, OK, so we've heard some details of what's to be expected in New South Wales. Can you just expand on that for us?
Yeah, so Falzia, really what will happen in New South Wales is quite similar to what was outlined and agreed to by the National Cabinet on Friday. So from Friday, they'll come into effect 15th of May, so this Friday. The outdoor gatherings of up to 10 people will be allowed. You'll be able to have 5 visitors in your home. Cafes and restaurants will be able to have 10 people eat in at any one time. There's also that relaxation around weddings and funerals. So weddings can now have up to 10 guests, funerals up to 20 people there. If it's inside, outside, up to 30. And for places of worship too, they'll be allowed to have up to 10 people, either inside a church or a mosque or wherever you worship. Now, there's also, we're not quite sure of the details, but in terms of outdoor equipment, so playgrounds and outdoor gyms, which have been taped off in New South Wales, they will reopen, the Premier says, with caution. So we're not quite sure exactly what that means. And also outdoor pools will also reopen with restrictions. So the Premier is talking later today in about an hour, and we'll get a bit more clarity around those issues.
So that's what we're expecting to be lifted. But what about what won't change in New South Wales?
One big one that the National Cabinet agreed to but won't be implemented in New South Wales is regional travel. So nobody will be allowed to go on holidays in regional areas. So we did have some relaxation about a week ago in terms of visitation, 2 people being able to visit. And at that time, they said, we're not going to restrict exactly where you can visit. So say you're in Sydney, you can go and visit your mum or a friend in the Blue Mountains, but you have to come home again. That stays in place. So there's no weekend trips to Byron anytime soon. Joanna here. But it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what the Premier says, because she's tried to be really quite cautious in this approach. She said last week that she was really happy with the restrictions that New South Wales had in place. A few had been relaxed in terms of this week. Public schools are going back 1 day a week. So there has been a slight easing, and the Premier said she was very comfortable with this, but it seems now that she has gone with the rest of the nation with this National Cabinet. So it'll be interesting to see what she has to say about that in about an hour.
Absolutely. Ash, thanks for taking us through that. And as Ash mentioned, we will be hearing from the New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian in about an hour's time, so we'll try and bring you that live when that happens. Now, in Queensland, meanwhile, restrictions have been eased again this weekend, allowing families some more freedoms to celebrate Mother's Day. Our reporter Emily Gramenz joins us now from Brisbane. Emily, good morning to you. What can people do today that they couldn't do yesterday?
Good morning, Fauzia. Well, in recent weeks, Queenslanders have been limited to having 2 visitors at any one time. And today, in recognition of Mother's Day, a household group of up to 5 people can now go and visit another household. And that's pretty welcome news for families who usually would have, children, grandchildren, parents over to celebrate Mother's Day. The travel restrictions that the government's asked everyone to adhere to as well. People have been asked to stay within 50 kilometres of their home for other activities, but today you can go further than that. They only ask that people don't go into another community, that they just go to one residence, stay there and then go home. There's also no limit on how many household groups you can have over, so you could have one family visit around to mum's in the morning and then another child and their children over in the afternoon. But people have been asked to stick back to social distancing still, staying 1.5 metres away from each other at all times, and sadly, no hugging this Mother's Day.
Oh, that is quite sad. Emily, when then can Queenslanders see a further relaxation of the rules?
Well, this is a week on from the first ever so slight easing of restrictions here in Queensland, where people could go outside for picnics in their household groups, or 2 single people together, and they could go outside basically for recreation other than just exercise. Now, next weekend, it'll be 2 weeks since that first easing of restrictions, and that means another relaxation of the rules. The key things is people will be able to gather in groups of up to 10 in public. Then pubs, clubs, restaurants and eateries will be able to open for up to 10 patrons at any one time. And those restrictions are eased even further in regional areas. Eateries can have up to 20 people, and people will be able to travel up to 500 kilometres away from their home in regional areas as well. And the government's saying that relaxing of restrictions will be in place for another month before they consider moving on to what they're calling stage 2 of the easing of restrictions.
Emily Grammans in Brisbane, thank you.
The federal opposition is demanding the government explain how unemployed people will pay their bills when welfare is reduced. The job seeker payment has been boosted by $550 a fortnight in response to the coronavirus crisis. The Prime Minister Scott Morrison has confirmed the supplement will be phased out by September because it's designed to be a temporary measure. But Labor frontbencher Tony Burke has told insiders many Australians will need economic support beyond that point.
I don't see how the Prime Minister's concept of snapback is going to work. I just don't see how it does, David. And, you know, you look at the projections that Josh Frydenberg has already provided, it's a long time before we get to employment levels as they were. Now, unless you want people to suddenly be able to not pay their bills, unless you want people to suddenly vacating the premises where they live and handing back the keys to homes that they've mortgaged, then the government is going to have to look at extending this. Think of the alternative, and I don't think that's what we want Australia to look like in a few months' time.
In the US, 3 children in the state of New York have died from a rare inflammatory condition believed to be linked to the coronavirus. A further 73 children have presented with similar symptoms, and New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says the development is challenging assumptions that children can't be affected by COVID-19.
Toddler, elementary school children are presenting symptoms similar to Kawasaki disease or toxic shock-like syndrome. Now, these are children who come in who don't present the symptoms that we normally are familiar with COVID. It's not a respiratory illness. They're not in respiratory distress. And I think that's one of the reasons why this may be getting discovered this far into the process.
Indonesia has reported its highest daily number of new coronavirus infections since the pandemic began. The Health Ministry confirmed 533 new cases today, taking the total to more than 13,600. Another 16 people have died, taking the toll to nearly 960. The government is urging Indonesians to continue to obey orders to stay home to curb the spread of the virus.
The UK is beginning to announce plans to ease lockdown restrictions, but warns it will proceed with extreme caution as the death toll continues to climb towards 32,000. Airlines based in Britain say they've been told the government will bring in a 14-day quarantine at the end of this month for all passengers arriving in the UK from everywhere except the Irish Republic. The UK's Transport Secretary has also pledged a $3.8 billion package to boost cycling and walking after the coronavirus lockdown to curb the number of people on public transport.
The need to maintain social distancing means that our public transport system cannot go back to where it left off. And here is a very stark fact. Even with public transport reverting to a full service, once you take into account the 2-metre social distancing rule, there would only be effective capacity for 1 in 10 passengers in many parts of our network. Just a tenth of the old capacity. So getting Britain moving again, while not overcrowding our transport network, is going to require many of us to think very carefully about how and when we travel.